The trade dispute between the United States and Canada has now spilled into a fight over the name of one of North America's Great Lakes. President Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. government to officially call Lake Ontario Lake America, but the change applies only to U.S. federal usage, and Canada says it will continue to call the lake Lake Ontario. The move follows the collapse of trade negotiations between Washington and Ottawa after Canada rejected what it described as unacceptable U.S. demands. Washington has since imposed 50% tariffs on some Canadian goods, with Canada responding with retaliatory tariffs. The lake name dispute is now the latest flashpoint in an increasingly strained relationship between two countries whose economies are deeply intertwined.
The purpose of this, more than anything else, is we're going to be changing the name of Lake Ontario, effective immediately, to Lake America. That's going to take place right now as I sign the order. Do you have anything to say about it, Ben?
Yes, sir. So this is a straightforward but important executive order. It directs Secretary Burgum and the Department of the Interior to update the Geographic Names Information Service to reflect that the lake once known as Lake Ontario will, from this day forward, be known as Lake America. This is a lake that has most of its volume in the United States. The deepest parts of the lake sit in United States territory, so this will reflect that this is an American lake.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. And we filed all the necessary papers, documents, everything else. We notified all of the various people that we have to notify. So we've done everything that you have to do. And this is official, effective immediately.
Right, for more, let's speak to U.S. correspondent Sharon Rice-Peace, who joins us virtually from New York. Sharon, good evening to you. And it's the gift that keeps on giving, right? So how has the Canadian government responded to this latest development? And how significant is Mark Carney's refusal to adopt the name Lake America?
Bongiwe, I might be dating myself in this response, but there's a famous soap opera from the 1990s into the early 2000s. I won't mention the name of the soap opera, but it would open up every opening sequence with the words, like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. And, I always think of that adage when I think about some of the things we cover in the relationship that so many countries now enjoy with the United States, no less one of its closest, long-standing allies in the name of Canada to the north. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, responding on X to the move to rename Lake Ontario to Lake America by the US President. Quote, the name Lake Ontario, he says, comes from the Wendat word. Wendat is an original peoples, indigenous peoples from the Great Lakes region. The word Ontario, which appropriately means the lake is beautiful, the lake is big. The name is more than 400 years old, predating both the Conference of Canada and the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. We know that America is changing their trading relationships, their foreign policies, their national monuments, their hydronyms. Hydronyms refers to bodies of water, oceans, lakes, and so forth. Canadians also know that naming reality means calling it Lake Ontario then, now, and always. And of course, this comes due to this this tariff spat, this trade relationship that continues to be under review between Ottawa and Washington. And of course, very much speaks to a changing relationship between Canada and the United States. And of course, if you think about how unpopular Donald Trump has become in Canada since assuming, retaking the White House last year, I was looking at some polling today. Almost 8 in 10 Canadians have an unfavorable view of the US president, including the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, who tends to push back a little bit like President Donald Trump does when he doesn't agree with people. He was asked a question by a journalist regarding unfavorable remarks he made about the President of the United States. This was that exchange before Lake America became a thing. Watch.
A little more subdued than you did this morning on the radio when you said Donald Trump could kiss your ass. Did the Prime Minister tell you to ask you to tone it down a bit?
No, he didn't. I'm not going to comment, but he wasn't against that. And I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass. So
well done.
I just do. I'm a big dude. What can I say? As I said before, he's the type of guy in school that would take your lunch money one day, take your toque off your head the next day, and then steal your running shoes. But I'm not going to take any advice off a guy that's the king of bankruptcies. And he's actually tariffing his own people, taxing his own people. And I'm going to make sure I communicate through the U.S. media. I'm going to be reaching out to every single governor, every single senator, and every single congressperson. And when it comes to the midterms, I have a message to the Americans. Don't vote in a person that's going to kill your jobs. He ran on creating more jobs. Last time I checked, jobs went down in the U.S., and Ontario created more jobs.
So what does this announcement by the US president really mean? US federal agencies are being directed to use Lake America rather than Lake Ontario in things like federal maps, records, geographic databases. The order directs the Interior Department, Bongiwe, and the US Board of Geographic Names to implement that change. Canada is not bound by the change. They've already articulated that they will not be changing Lake Ontario's name, and certainly other countries, international organizations won't necessarily change either. And it's akin to the earlier change from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. You can call it Gulf of America in the United States, but I don't think many countries around the world have jumped on that bandwagon, if you can put it a different way.
You know, when you started us off with that show, right, I couldn't help but think of how busy Stefano Demira was. So I suppose I'm revealing my age.
So we have a fan here, folks. We have a fan. She's been outed.
I'm trying. Show it. Let's get back to serious business. And, you know, when you listen to that particular clip, it's quite interesting because this relationship that we're watching crumble before our eyes, right, is a relationship between two traditional allies, the closest allies that we've seen. But it appears as if it's no longer the case since President Trump's return to office. And I wonder, do you think that we're seeing a fundamental realignment in how Ottawa views its relationship with Washington?
It's a more than $900 billion relationship. So what that realignment looks like, I think a good analogy would be moving from a petrol guzzling car or a diesel guzzling engine to a hybrid model where you're still trying to figure out in which direction you're going here. But the goal becomes getting to an electric car with just a battery operated with no fumes coming out of the exhaust. And I think that is the transition you are watching slowly evolve for our eyes. But understand that this is a very integrated relationship. The economies, various northern states, Maine, Wisconsin, Michigan, have very close relationships with the United States. In terms of car manufacturing, there is such a close relationship between Mexico, Canada, and the United States that different components are attached to the vehicles in different parts in the three countries. So it's a very integrated relationship. So to unbundle and unwind that is a really complicated endeavor. But what the Canadians have indicated as early as Davos earlier this year, Mark Carney's a seismic moment at Davos where he talked about middle powers acting together, because if you are not at the table, you are on the menu, is now developing into them demonstrating what middle powers can do here. This was Mark Carney speaking soon after he withdrew his negotiating team from Washington last week when they were unable to find a common ground with the United States. This is what he said, watch.
We recognized from the start that America has changed.
You're telling me
Early last year in this room, I observed that the decades-long process of steadily increasing integration between our economies was over. Our government understood before many that America would transform all of its commercial relationships, that it would put a series of tariffs on its closest allies and use economic integration as a weapon. We recognize that sometimes its signature was written in pencil. Canada will match Washington's new tariffs dollar for dollar in order to protect Canadian workers, farmers, families, and businesses.
So speaking to this, over $900 billion relationship, it's going to be very difficult to move away entirely from it. Canada is talking to various other regions about new trade deals. It seeks to expand exports to different regions, understanding that its relationship with the United States cannot no longer be relied on to the extent it has been in the past. But understand also that America first means America first. The question is, what can other countries collectively or individually do to counter the behemoth that is America, right? It is a huge economy. It has a huge ability to influence economic, military, and so forth. And so what the calibration looks like moving forward, maybe Mark Carney is giving countries around the world some direction here.
All right, Sherwin, let's see then what happens, especially because it seems like this is one of those chapters that you and I are going to keep circling back to given the developments here. So thank you so much for just wrapping that for us. And that is Sherwin Bryce-Pease there, our US correspondent, joining us virtually from New York.